Welcome back to the Shir in Lakutei Siches, Chelek Yud Beis. We'll be learning the second Sicha for Pashas Emor, which is the Sicha on Rashi in the Posuk Perek Chof Gimel, Posuk Chof Dalet, 23-24. A few words of introduction before we start on the Posuk, the Rashi, and the Sicha. In this Posuk, the Torah introduces what we call Rosh Hashanah as the day for shofar blowing. In the Torah, the term Rosh Hashanah does not appear. In fact, the beginning of the name Rosh Hashanah only started when Yidden came back from Golus Bovel. That's when they began to call Tishrei the beginning of the year. In Torah, in Chumash, Nisan is the first of the months, and Tishrei is month number 7, B'chodesh HaShvi'i, the 7th month. Also, we don't have the term shofar in connection with this day of Rosh Hashanah in Chumash at all. All it says is that this day, the first day of the 7th month, which is Tishrei, remember that the name Tishrei also did not begin until Yidden came back from Golus Bavel. That's when they began to call months by their names. Until then, they were mostly called by their number. So the idea of Rosh Hashanah as a day for blowing is first introduced in this posuk. There wasn't any mention of this date yet. The Sholosh Regolim appear already in Pashat Mishpotim and Shmois, but Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur don't appear in Chumash at all yet until this point. So we don't know from anywhere that Rosh Hashanah is a day for blowing. We certainly don't know yet that it has to do with shofar, because the idea of blowing with a shofar is derived by a comparison with the blowing which we do on the Yom Kippur of Yovel. There it mentions shofar, and by means of Gzeras HaKosov, we learn it for Rosh Hashanah as well. In any case, so this is the first mention of the date and the first mention of blowing. Now, in Parshas Pinchos, there it says that Rosh Hashanah is Yom Teruah, is the day of blowing. There's a day of actively blowing. Blowing what? We know that it means blowing the shofar. Over here, in our posuk, it doesn't talk about the date of Rosh Hashanah as the day of blowing, but it talks about the Zichroin Teruah. It's a day of remembering or mentioning, as the Rebbe will explain it, the Teruah, the blowing. What exactly does that term mean? That's what we'll see in the Postuk and in the Rashi and later in the Sicha. So the Postuk says, Dabro b'nei Yisrael leimoid, that Moshe Rabbeinu should talk to Yidden as follows: B'chodesh hashvi'i bechad lachodesh, on the first day of the 7th month, on the first day what we call Tishrei, Yeh lachem Shabboson, it shall be a day of rest, not a regular work day. Zichroin Teruah, a day when we remember Teruah blowing. Mikra Kodesh, a day which we shall call holy. Now Rashi brings the two words from the Posuk Zichroin Teruah, remembering the blowing, and he explains Zichroin psuke zichroinois upsuke shoifrois, a remembrance of the psukim that talk about Hashem being mindful of his creation, remembering his creatures for the good, and psuke shoifrois, psukim which talk about shofar mainly at Har Sinai, and also in the course of history when Hashem will herald the Geula by means of a call of a shofar. So these are the two kinds of psukim, zechroinis and shofris. And why do we remember them or mention these psukim? Lizkor lochem akedas Yitzchok, to remember for your Yidden's benefit the akedas Yitzchok, when Yitzchok allowed himself to be bound and just short of slaughtered until the Malach was sent to prevent Avram Avinu from slaughtering him. So Yitzchok Avinu gave his life for Hashem, shekorev tachtov ayil, in whose place, in the place of Yitzchok, Avram Avinu offered a ram, and you know that the ram is connected to the shofar because the shofar is the ram's horn. So this is the connection of the psukim of Zechroinos and Shofrois. You'll remember that we call Rosh Hashanah in our tefillas Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembrance, and it's based on this posuk. Now, the Rebbe begins, after quoting the Rashi, he said that the two words Zichron Trua, remembering Trua, they're quite ordinary words in Lashon HaKodesh. They don't seem to need any explanation. Why does Rashi find it necessary to comment? So the Rebbe brings Meforshim, like the Mizrochi and the Maharal, who say that Rashi was bothered by these words, Zichron Trua, because later on in Parshas Pinchas, the Torah called it Yom Trua. Here it's different. Torah calls it Zichron, remembering a Trua. So, which is it? Therefore, Rashi explains here that the postuk is talking about the psukim of Zichronis and the psukim of Shofrois. But said the Rebbe, that Pirush of the Mizrahi and the Maharal and others is difficult to understand for two reasons. The more general reason is that Rashi, the way of Rashi is that he raises a question when it comes up. When we learn the postuk Zichron Trua, are we bothered yet by the fact that later on in the next Chumash in Parshas Pinchas it will say something different? Right now we don't have a problem. When we get to Parshas Pinchas and we see that Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Trua, then it bothers us. Why here in Parshas Pinchas is it different from earlier in Parshas Emor where the Torah called it Zichron Trua? That's where Rashi should have come with his comment explaining the difference between Emor and Pinchas. But at this point, what question is there? Besides that, Rashi doesn't mention that question at all about the discrepancy between Emor and Pinchas, that it's written one way here and another way there. He doesn't mention that at all. He should have said, as he often does, when he raises seeming contradictions between psukim and he reconciles them. He says, and elsewhere it says such and such. So likewise over here it should have said, Ube Parshas Pinchas Nema Yom Trua. In Parshas Pinchas it says about Rosh Hashanah that it's a day of blowing. The answer is that over here we're talking about the psukim Rashi doesn't say that at all. He just goes straight ahead and explains the word Zichron Trua as referring to the Psukim. That's why it's difficult to learn, like the Mizrahi and the Maharal, that Rashi is out to answer the seeming contradiction between this Parsha and Parshas Pinchas. On the other hand, we need to understand, where does Rashi get it from that Zichron Trua is by staying Psukim? There's no mention of staying over here at all. It's just remembering Trua. So those questions are about the Rashi in general. Now let's look at what Rashi does say. He said that Zichron means Psukim of Zichronis and Psukim of Shoifris. So we need to understand the word Zichron Trua is the word Zichron is connected to the word Trua. Otherwise, if we talk about remembering, it's Zikoron. Zichron Trua, it's remembering about the Trua. So it seems to be that there's only one thing that we're being taught in this postuk about remembering, and that is the Trua. If anything, we should know about Psukim of Shoifres, but where do we get the idea that Zichronis themselves are meant to be said? Second of all, after Rashi cites the words Zichron Trua in his Dibur HaMaschel, in his opening words, in his heading, why does Rashi find it necessary again to cite in his Pirush Zichron in order to explain that it's Psuke Zichronis? And if you find it necessary, if Rashi finds it necessary to bring that word Zichron to tell us that the mention of the Psukim is learned from the word Zichron, so why doesn't he say it in connection with the Psukim of Shoifres? Zichron Psuke Zichronis v'Zichron Psuke Shoifres. Third of all, Rashi finishes off by saying, why do we say these psukim? To remember for you the merit of Akedas Yitzchok, the binding of Yitzchok, in whose stead a ram was offered. Now, it's not generally Rashi's objective that in Pshuta Shel Mikra, Rashi doesn't find it necessary to offer reasons for mitzvahs. Why suddenly here is it important why we mention these psukim? So the Rebbe begins to explain. What Rashi is out to do here is not to explain the term Zichron Trua, but to explain what kind of remembering are we supposed to do. It's not that Hashem should remember us, as other Meforshim like the Rashbam and the Ramban explain, Zichron Trua, that we will be remembered by means of our blowing. Says Rashi, no, that cannot be, because the pasuk begins, speak to Eden, saying that on this first day of Tishrei, Yeh lochem, it shall be for you a day of rest, a Zichron Trua. So it's for Eden. The Zichron Trua is for Eden to do or say or something. It's an instruction to Eden. It's not about what Hashem will do. It's lochem. But it doesn't say what we're supposed to do. They should remember Trua. But it's not clear at all. Remember how? Remember what? So Rashi explains that they should mention. So the word Zichron over here means to mention Zichronis and Psukim of Shoifres. So this is not just an instruction to remember, but it's an instruction to do something specific, which is to stay the psukim of the chroines v'shoifres. And this is alluded to by the word zichroin, because as Rashi already explained in Pashas Yisroi, when the Pasuk says, Zochoir es yoim HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos day. So Rashi said, what does it mean, remember the Shabbos day? Nu leiv lizkor tomid es yoim HaShabbos. Pay attention always to remember the Shabbos day, so that if on Sunday or Monday you come across something nice, set it aside for Shabbos. So you're remembering the Shabbos all week. So it's not just remembering, but it's a remembrance that means attention, which leads to action. In the case of Shabbos, it leads to the action of setting aside things that are especially nice or tasty, setting them aside for Shabbos. Likewise, in our case, remembering the Teruah means remembering in a way that will lead to action. What is that action? Mentioning the psukim of Zechroinos and the psukim of Shoifrois. But we still need to understand why the Pasuk refers to this mitzvah of staying with the term Zichroin. After all, generally, Zichroin, which is about remembering, comes to offset the possibility of forgetting. For example, Zochoir es yoim HaShabbos, remember the Shabbos day. Since the Shabbos comes once a week, on Sunday or Monday, you're liable to forget about it. So the Torah said, no, keep the Shabbos in mind in a way that will lead to a practical action towards Shabbos, setting aside things for Shabbos. So we understand why we need the term Zochoir to offset the possibility of forgetting. We find also, said the Rabbi, the term Zachartani, remember me, that Yosef HaTzadik said to the Star Hamashkim, Paro's chief butler, when they were together in prison, and the chief butler dreamt a dream, and Yosef interpreted the dream. After interpreting the dream, he says to him, Ki im zachartani, just remember me. In other words, remember that I helped you by interpreting your dream. You were very upset because you didn't know what the dream meant, and I told you the good news that the dream meant that you will be reinstated as chief butler, which happened 3 days later. So he's asking that despite the fact that you will be taken out of this dungeon, you will be reinstated at Paro's hand as chief butler. So it'll be very exciting times and dramatic times in your life. In all that, you are liable to forget me. So I'm asking you to remember me. That Yosef wants him to remember despite the likelihood that the Star HaMashkim, the butler, will forget him. So there we understand the term Zikorin. Over here, what is there to remember? Rosh Hashanah is one day. There's nothing that's going to make you forget. So why does the Torah find it necessary to tell us about the mention and the staying of the psukim using the word zikorin? That's why Rashi learns that the word zichroin doesn't refer to remembering. The teruah, as it would seem by that construct, where the zichroin is the remembrance of teruah, so that we should say the psukim of shoifrois. But zichroin is an instruction in itself, that we should say psukim of zechroinos. But zechroinos, we're supposed to remember something. We're talking about psukim about remembering. Remembering what? Remembering always refers to an event that happens in the past. What are we supposed to remember in this case? That's why Rashi concludes by saying, in order to remember, to be mindful, and that Hashem too should be mindful and remember Akedat Yitzchok. So this idea of Zikorin, which comes about through saying the Psukim, is not just to awaken our memory, the memory of Yidden, but also to arouse, so to speak, the memory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that he should remember for you the merit of Akedat Yitzchok. Why does Rashi say this? After the words Psuke Shoifris, and after that Rashi says that he should remember for you Akedat Yitzchok, that belongs to the Zechroinus. Remember what? Remember the Akedat Yitzchok. But after Shoifris, what Akedat Yitzchok doing there? That's why Rashi's final words say that Shoifros is connected to that memory because it was subsequent to the Akedah that Avraham Avinu offered the ram. And the shofar is taken from the ram's horn. So by blowing on the ram's horn, that too calls to mind Akedat Yitzchok and brings out the memory of Akedat Yitzchok and the merit of Yidden. And in this way, the word Zichroin, in addition to being an instruction that we should remember by saying psukim of Zichroinos, it's also attached to the shofros. It does belong together with shofar because the shofars too, the psukim of shofars as well, have to do with zikoroin, remembering. And what is that? Remembrance of Akedat Yitzchok. Now we can understand why Rashi brings in his heading Zichroin Trua. Why not just say Trua? Trua what? How should we remember the Trua? By saying Psukim of Shoifres and also Zichroinis. So the Rebbe said that the reason that Rashi brings the word Zichroin is because that's the word that teaches us about saying Psuke Zichroinos. It's not just related to the word Trua, remember the Trua, which follows the word Zichroin. No, the Zichroin itself is an instruction. What is the instruction? To say Psuke Zichroinos. And therefore he doesn't have to go back and say the word Psuke, because in the case of Zichroin, in order to avoid the mistake of saying that it refers only to Trua, Rashi says Psuke Zichroinis. But he doesn't have to avoid that possible mistake in the case of Trua, therefore he doesn't repeat the word Psuke Trua, Psuke Shoifres. From the fact that it says Zichroin Trua, which indicates that Trua too has something to do with Zikoroin, that proves for Rashi that both the Psukim of Zichroinis and the Psukim of Shoifris both have one common goal of remembering Akedat Yitzchok, in whose stead the ram was offered. And there, accordingly, said the Rebbe, we could add another explanation of why Rashi brings the word Zichroin. And he continues Psuke Zichroinis and Psuke Shoifres, and he doesn't interrupt with the word Trua, meaning Psuke Shoifres. Thereby he emphasizes that the Shoifres come for the same purpose as the Zichroinis, to remember Akedat Yitzchok. The Trua too is for the purpose of Zikoroin. Now, if we go back and look at the Rashi based on the way the Rebbe explained it, and we look to answer the kashas that the Rebbe asked. So first of all, the word zichroin in the heading of the Rashi is in order to teach us that this is going to be a mention, an act of staying the psukim. That's what we learned from the word zichron, psuke, zichronis and shoifres. Rashi, what's Rashi out to explain generally? The Rebbe asked his first question, why does Rashi find it necessary to comment? So it's not because of the contradiction between here and Pashat Pinchas. In Pashat Pinchas it said Yoim Trua, and here it says Zichroin Trua. That's not what Rashi is out to explain, because then he would comment in Pashat Pinchas and not here. Rather, what Rashi is out to explain is, Torah said remember, but how are we supposed to remember? And what we're supposed to remember is not clear. So Rashi came to explain that. That the remembrance is to say psukim of Zechroinis and Shoifres. What is it about Zichroin that Torah uses that expression in order to tell us to say something? Why not just say that it'll be a special day, Amiras Trua, Zichroin Trua, Amiras Trua? Therefore, Rashi learns that the Zichroin Trua teaches us a separate instruction from Trua, a mention of Psuke Zechroinois. Why does Rashi find it necessary to repeat the Zichroin when he talks about the Psukim? Because that's what teaches us the instruction that it's about staying psukim and not just remembering the Trua. So it's a zichroin as a separate word. Why does Rashi come back and say Lisko lochem akedas yitzchok? Why is that necessary here? Because if you remember something, there has to be something in the past that you're remembering. What is it about the past that we're remembering? It's the Akedas Yitzchok. And the purpose of our mention is to have the Eibishter remember our merit of Akedas Yitzchok. Now, because Zichroin Teruah indicate that there's a connection between the Korin and the Teruah, it's not just Zichroin and Trua. Then it would say Zikorin and Trua. It's Zichroin Trua. Why? Because the purpose of the psukim of Shoifres are common to both kinds of psukim. Zichroinis and Shoifres both have the same objective of mentioning the schus of Yidden of Akedas Yitzchok. So what rules of Rashi have we learned in this Sikha? Number one, that Rashi will never raise a question of a seeming contradiction of psukim before the question arises. In the first mention of something, there is not yet a contradiction. We only have that pasuk. It's when we get to the second seemingly contradictory pasuk, that's where Rashi will ask, what about the previous pasuk where it's said differently? And he will answer that seeming contradiction. Also, when Rashi wants to point out a contradiction, he says, how about the other place where it says differently? He won't just go explaining the pasuk without mentioning that it's a problem because it seems to contradict the other pasuk. Another rule of Rashi, which the Rebbe taught us over here, is that Rashi does not generally find it as his objective. He doesn't find it necessary, even according to Pshuta Shel Mikra, to offer reasons for mitzvahs. If Hashem gave the reason in the pasuk, fine. Otherwise, it's not necessary for us to explore the reason, and Rashi will not explain the reason unless by explaining it, he explains the meaning of the words in the Pasuk.